So good morning, everybody. Okay, welcome to join the webinar of the IAMCP Greater China and also the IAMCP Malaysia chapter. Okay, today we have an honor to invite a guest speaker. I do believe that most of you already know him for a long time because he's the expert in the cybersecurity. Okay, Mr. Stanley Lee is the Chief Executive of the Securli. Okay, he has more than 2 decades of experience in cybersecurity. We also always mention about cybersecurity. Actually, today he is going to share with us a little bit more about the cyber risk governance. So that's why we have better understanding about what's it talking about and how can it be beneficial for the organization or even some of the developer in the market, something like that. So maybe I would like to share a little bit more about the other guest speaker or the representative of the IAMCP Malaysia chapter and also the Greater China chapter. So Mr. CK Lee, he's the Vice President of the IAMCP Malaysia chapter. CK, would you mind say hi to everybody?
Hi, everyone.
Okay. So the other gentleman is Mr. Alex Lee. He's the Secretary of the IAMCP Greater China region.
Hello,
Alex.
hello.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Okay. Also today he is the stage manager, so that's why he managed everything for us. Okay. So I believe there is a very good day. Good day? Is it a bad Friday? Anyway, okay, it's a good time for us to interact with everybody. And then if you have any kind of question, maybe you can state it on the LinkedIn or YouTube channel. So that's why you can respond to you, or maybe later we can interact with you together. So maybe I want to pass the time to Mr. CK. So that's why you can start the conversation with Stanley. CK, I pass the time to you.
Definitely. Thank you. Okay. First of all, thank you, Stanley, for taking your time, and also to others who have attended this webinar. So I hope you have a good Friday or Thursday evening, depends on where you are. So, okay, I guess today the topic about cyber risk governance will be a very interesting one, especially we have Mr. Stanley, who has a lot of experience and even running his own company, Securli. So to start off these webinars, let me actually get Stanley to help us understand what is actually a cyber security. And also, as we all know, right, cybersecurity governance, right, provides a strategic view of how organization controls its security, including a lot of things like the risk appetite, building accountability frameworks, and so on and so forth. So Stanley, what is the challenge for organization of different size and resources to adopt cybersecurity governance?
Well, first of all, it's an honor to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation and allow me to share my knowledge, the little knowledge about cybersecurity. So the question, CK, you ask, basically, there's a lot of keywords, and each keyword can be a topic on its own. So let me just define it for the audience, what we are talking about in the terms of cyber risk governance or even cybersecurity on its own. And of course that I have to go back into many years, but I'll make it short. Cybersecurity is just part of IT back in those days, and it was called network management. When I still remember my certificate is still called network management. But now we actually in the 5th generation of cybersecurity already. So as you can see, within the last 20 some odd years, the industry has changed a lot. And why now cyber risk governance is because but let me look at it from a perspective of World Economic Forum from that perspective. And everybody can go to World Economic Forum to look for the strategic intelligence. And they have a cybersecurity interactive map. And as you can see, that is very complex. And it has 8 major categories and then many subcategories that basically it touches on everything in what we're doing today. And what we refer is digital assets. But why cyber risk? What is that meaning to cybersecurity? Now we have to look at it from a risk perspective for most of the organization. And then the way that we break down the conversations, we divide it into 3 stakeholders groups: the business leaders, the governors, which is compliance or risk management, and then the technologists, which involve with IT and of course cybersecurity in the technology solutions. Besides the 3 stakeholders, we also try to break it down into 2 sets of controls: the technical controls and the governance controls. Why we have to break them down into such a smaller pieces? is because the conversation is very complex. And why is it very complex? Well, besides you see that the strategic intelligence map from World Economic Forum, that there are many layers in the OSI model, 7 layers. And cybersecurity pretty much touches on every single layer of it. And all those 7 layers basically govern everything we do in the cyber world. But now also another part of it is the governance side. And the governance side is the governance, risk, and compliance. So if you look at all those acronyms and the words that you put together, there is no one set group of people can manage it all. And that's why we have to start breaking it down. Well, who are the stakeholders? What are the objectives? As we identify the 3 groups of stakeholders, the business leaders, then there's another 2 groups out of that, which is the C-suites and then the board of directors. Each group of those peoples, if you may, has their own responsibility and their own objective. So as you can see from just on the organizational structures, there are so many different layers, from board of directors to the C-suites, and then go down all the way into the help desk person, or even the end users. Each one of them has their own responsibilities in terms of the cybersecurity. But if you ask them, what is that all about? Well, they would tell you it's hackers, attacks. That's pretty much what they know, right? But once we as a technologist or practitioner, why are we still calling it practitioners? Because it's an evolving target. Every day that in the average technologists have to manage over 170 type of technical controls to protect an organization with those many different layers of applications, hardware, software, you name it. So that's why it becomes very complex. And that's also why that we have to break it down. But then it boils down to the organizations, come back to one word, is risk. So you can look at it from an enterprise risk perspective, but inside the enterprise risk, there are so many different types of risks. So what we're dealing with today is from the help desk all the way to the cybersecurity insurance, that how the insurance company underwriting the insurance policies for the large corporations, or in the government sometimes that they have to underwrite themselves. So that's why that we have to look at it from a different angle. That's why we have to look at it, and we call it cyber risk governance, because these 2 sets of controls, the technical and the governance controls, right now they are managed in separate, in silos, as a fragmented. But we are looking at to try to collaborate them and then communicate into one terms, and to bring the awareness and the knowledge together. We call it cognizance, to bring that together for those 3 groups of stakeholders as a starting point. But of course, those 3 groups of stakeholders can pretty much drive everything into the organization, into the end users. And one of the examples that we did is back in 2015, 2016. So we put a monitoring system. I'm not going to name the terms because then it becomes too much selling. But we put a monitoring system into an organization that about 300 users. In the beginning, we got about, each month, in the first 12 months, we got about 450 security incidents. But 12 months later, it reduced into 150. And why is such a big reduction? And actually, we were able to achieve into the 200 range, half of it within 3 months. Why such a big reductions? It's just bringing up the awareness. So let's go back into the word cognizance, knowledge and awareness. As long as that you can bring the awareness to the people who is using IT, simply say, then that they become more aware of what's going on, not just about all the hackers, it's nothing to do with me, that is going into we try to train them to read every single email to avoid the phishing attacks, and so on and so forth. But there's a lot of errors that come into play. There are 5 different types of risk that we identify just looking at the technical controls, and continue further down to narrow those topics down into something that is manageable. And then from that manageable pieces, then we go back and try to see and measure and monitor them to make sure that they accomplish what the upper management set out to do, their objectives. So what we're calling it is basically it's a progression process. From cyber risk, dealing with governance to satisfy GRCs, the governance, risk, and compliance. And then from there, it goes back into benefiting all the end users. Why is it benefiting to end users? Because if a corporation got hacked, well, right now everybody knows it's ransomware attack. There potentially that company is going to have to shut down, and which has already happened. Average case of a ransomware is over 800,000 US dollars. Not many small business owner can afford that kind of price. So what happened? They're going to have to shut down, or that they're going to lose a lot of money. Then when the company is not making the profit, how are they going to pay the end users, the staffs? So it becomes a very vicious cycle into this whole cybersecurity thing. But we don't try to use a term to define what is going on with all this process and progress. That's why we emphasize on trying to measure it with data and looking into it with the data science. I know it's kind of deviated from your questions, but as I mentioned that because that when the question that you go back into organizational controls and the challenges, these are the challenges that we have to manage on the daily basis. And how can we measure that? How can we monitor all those challenges on the daily basis? That is why we have to break them down into smaller bite size and then approach this whole cyber risk governance with a step-by-step approach.
Yeah. Thank you, Stanley.
I'm going to stop because I know that there's a lot of questions probably everybody's thinking in their head. So we can make it interactive. As I said too, it's if you starting with the World Economic Forums, just look at that map, and then people can realize. And I think that this message is more mainly for the business leaders in their organization or even governments. How are they going to approach this? Just looking at the World Economic Forum's strategic intelligence map, and to look at what is related to all these industries. How everything's starting. If you look at the center of cybersecurity, and then one of the area is regulations, and then you can see that map that is basically interactively connecting to every single piece of what we're dealing with today. And it comes down to, if you watch the news, if you reading all those news about all those hacks, and of course the latest one being that the cryptocurrency 615 million being stolen. Everybody hear those news, but a lot of people would think, well, what has that got to me? What has got to do with me? What has that got to do with my organizations? There is a lot why the World Economic Forum put that map in there, because it is an economic impact to everyone. Who's going to pay the bill, right? That's the bottom line. When the hackers got all those, millions or billions of dollars, well, who's going to pay the bill? How is the insurance company going to eventually pay those bills to pay those organizations to recover the data? Where's the money going to come from? Eventually, that trickles down to everybody that who is listening to this webinar, right?
Yeah. So I think this is a really huge topic whereby if we are going to talk about this can be a course by itself.
We have to break it into 3 webinars to just explain each stakeholder's role. What do they have to watch out for? And of course, as a business leader, that if we, let's just assume that most of our audience is focusing on the business side, we talk about the ROI. We break down the IT system, the cybersecurity solutions, hiring staff into 4 categories. And we name it revenue generations, revenue impact, efficiency generations, efficiency impact. So we look at those 4 categories and, talk to the C levels and the management level or small businesses. Well, do you care about your website? Does it have any e-commerce? Is it going to be impacting your business? If it doesn't, that's fine. That's economic, that's efficiency impact. That might be in the bottom of the ROI model. Then you don't have to spend so much money to protect your website. But you might get reputational damage. Somebody might deface your website. So that also depends on your company. If your company are like accounting firm, law firms, even though the website has nothing to do with your profession, but you don't want to have somebody to put defacing your website, that gives a very bad taste to your reputational costs and to all the audience, all your customers, right? So yes, it might be on the bottom, but sometimes that after we talk to them like this, well, does it damage your reputation, your branding? Then they might say, you know what, right? We need to put a little bit more security onto our website. All it takes, it might be just an MFA, multi-factor authentications, in case that some people don't know what MFA is. And in fact, that is one of the cheapest and the lowest cost solution. And the other one is the awareness. Why a staff awareness training? In some calculation, there was a statistics talking about like 67% on the ROI. Just because your staff knows what is going on, that they pay attention to the emails, they're not going to click any of those links or how they're serving those websites, it becomes part of their behavioral. So some people call it staff behavioral training or education. Because once you start changing those behavioral, like the case studies I talked about, and that's how we can reduce those security incidents. And of course, when the upper management or even the mid-management, that how we do it in technically is, okay, we look at it, there's an incident, somebody served a website that they shouldn't be serving. And all we did from an IT perspective, it says that we send a notice to the end users and their manager and say, you know what, we saw that you went to this website. Was it for a business purpose? Never know, right? We don't know what kind of business they do. IT cannot determine what the business objectives are. So these are the things that it comes into a discussion between the end users and the manager. But just simple things like that, because it brings up the awareness, then the end users would stop serving a lot of those websites that they shouldn't be doing. And of course, technically, the IT, the network engineers would have put some measures against it as well. So it might be by request, it might be already blocked. But all these activity that highlights the chances that the company might get attacked, all these little things will increase the awareness of the end users. And I also have given out a speech to a company in a staff training. And again, the way that we're using it is not just talking about the company, it's talking about the individual behavior. It's talking about, okay, how do you manage your password? It's not just for the company itself, but managing the password is also personal affecting. So when we start the training, everybody, it's another boring training. I heard of this so many times. I don't need to be here. But at the end of the day, because that we engaging them from a personal perspective, well, how do you manage your bank account? How do you then tell them how that it could affect into the corporate world? Then the tools that we say, well, it doesn't cost you any money. Now, most of those type of personal tools, because there are so many cybersecurity solutions, there are over 3,800 of them out there. And a lot of them, because they want to capture the market shares, then they want to give it away as an open source or trial. So you can you can leverage those open source or trials to enhance your personal cybersecurity, cyber resilience. That's another term that I'm going to talk about. So enhance your cyber resilience. But because of that, then they be more aware of what they're doing in the corporate world. And then at the end of the seminars that the people come to thank me, I say, wow, this is different. I said, well, it is because it's just once you make it into a very personalized things, and like I said, break it down, and to address it to the specific stakeholder, business leaders, governors and technologists, and based on their own objective to try to solve their problem with different type of solutions out in the market space, then it becomes personal, because we are helping them to make their job easier, actually helping them on their personal life as well as professional life. And that's our goal. And now going back to the term cyber resilience, now you're going to hear more about this term. What is cyber resilience? And again, if you look it up, and you can Google and Wikipedia and all that kind of things, but the way that we breaking it down is making it simple again, is IT plus cybersecurity plus governance, or GRC. But even though it sounds so simple into cyber resilience, each one of them has hundreds, if not thousands, of controls. We can't do it all. That's why we have to build an ecosystem, and something like into the ecosystem of technology ecosystem partnerships. So we partner with lawyers, we partner with risk managers, we partner with risk quantifications analysis, going into from underwriting of the insurance policies all the way into AI that basically just residing on the end user's computer and scanning each files as it comes in. So all of these, besides humans and machines, that we collapse them into a system and approach in that direction. And then so we can have a different piece that fits into different budgets, fits into the different IT or cybersecurity resources, and then fits into every single governance or regulations that they might be required for the company. And so just on the regulation itself, that we already broken down into, again, 4 different types of regulations, from global, such as GDPR, regional. In the United States, there are more, right? In the regional, just use United States as an example, CMMC, which is required by the Department of Defense to look at cyber maturity model and certifying those companies into 5 different levels. Then we're going down into industry, which is like PCI DSS. And then local, for example, California has its own, California, USA has its own privacy act called California Consumer Privacy Act. And again, to go back into complexity, Gartner has already predicted by next year, 2023, from 10% of the regulations it's going to be in the world that are going to be regulating privacy controls 2 years ago, is going to jump to 75% of the world's data is going to be protected by some sort of regulations. So you're talking about that like 7 times jump, 75%. That's the number they predicted by next year, comparing to 10 2 years ago. So you think about the magnitude of the volume of this type of regulations. And as I said, I broke it down into 4 different tiers. And that is going to be impacting every single one of us, or at least 75% of us in the world. So now going back into the organizations, big or small, how are they going to manage it? That becomes a huge challenge, especially when it comes to the smaller people, the smaller company. And I'm not talking about even the SOHO companies. I'm talking about the mid-sized company, anybody from 20 to 500 type of employee size. These are the hardest hit in the coming years. And there are like 60% of the business out there that kind of fall into that kind of size. So you're talking about millions of businesses. How are they going to handle that? How are they going to handle such a complex between technical and governance and the GRC processes? And if we don't break it down into a smaller bite size, they were never able to digest all this information. But what we are trying to convince the community, the technology community, is there are so many open source tools out there, SANS institutes had defined there are over 150 plus open source technology solutions out there that can help all these smaller companies. But it still require people from the IT world that knows how to deploy those tools and fits into the company objective. Or the bigger company, like of course Microsoft, that they have a lot of those tool sets that help to small business to evaluate their environment so they can plan their budget. And I think that go back into the word cognizance is knowledge and awareness. And then of course, then it goes into the business processes, planning, setting out the goals, communications among different stakeholders, including the supply chain, which you're going to see that is going to come down really hard again in the coming months. It's right now, it's already happening in the United States. I'm not going to go that deep again. But all of these has to start with the business leaders, whether you're a one-man owner, because we see a lot of our friends that being hacked because, you know, oh, it's not going to happen to me. But because of one phishing attack, one email, that they lost tens of thousands of dollars. And some of my IT friends, you know, small company, lost $1 million. And I say, you got nobody else to blame. You're in IT, so you should know better. But it happens because this is human error. We are all humans. We all make this similar type of mistakes. But who are we going to go out? Who are we reaching out to talk to? And again, the budget, how are we going to start? It always comes down to, you know, doesn't matter how complex or how advanced their knowledge, my counterparts, and we always talk about what is the single question that people, or actually we start with one and then we go back into three. It's how do we start? Big or small company. And it doesn't matter that you have a CISOs in your organizations, but every year after the last audit is completed, you're going to start your team again. Well, where are we going to start this year? And I talk to a lot of CISOs, and they always say, okay, well, there's a new attack. So where do we start again? And this is something that you read on the news every day, right? Oh, there's another one. Log4j is going to impact us for years to come. So if you don't have that vigilance, you don't have that cognizance, then you're going to be one of the ones that are going to get attacked tomorrow. So you always have to be on top of the world and always asking those questions. Where do we start? Okay, from the where do we start, and we call it like a GPS. It's like a pin drop. You know, back then when I was young, so I'm old, when I was young, I have to use a compass, right? Use a map, a paper map to get to where I wanted to go when I go to, you know, travel somewhere. Who uses that anymore? But a lot of corporations still using Excel spreadsheets. Where are they going to go? Some of them managing 40, 50, 60 related to cybersecurity. How are they going to see the future? How are they going to plan and what's coming down? By the time that you got those Excel spreadsheets, it's already historical records. So that's why that we have to look at it. How can we convert data visualization? How can we convert those Excel spreadsheet into data and make it into visualized? And that's what we are trying to do as an open source environment. We can't plan to give that away. So small business can start utilizing this type of free tool sets out there to measure where they are at, the pin drop in the GPS system. And then if you think about the GPS system 5-10 years ago, you know, okay, great. They give you a preview, you know, how to go there. Well, 300 yards later, you make a left turn. After 2 street light, you make a left turn. Okay, you try to remember, you could look at the list, and then you start following on the you know, on the dashboard, on the screen. Great, everything is fine. And then you get to a point that you get stuck in the traffic jam. Well, back in those days, you can't do anything. You start turning and looking into alternative route. But now today, you already have a, you know, avoidance guidance. So before you get there, the GPS is going to tell you, you need to avoid this route. Here's the alternative. And that's where we need to be. in the terms of cyber risk governance. That's where all the stakeholders can look at the map, can look at the GPS and say, which alternative route do I want to take? Or at least that they're going to start at the point of pin drop. I'm starting here at this location. Well, that's where the gap analysis comes in. And that's going to another conversations about the gap analysis. So from there, that at least that they can plan. And that's what we are trying to accomplish with the term cyber risk governance.
Okay, thank you so much, Stanley. Okay,
it is it's not something that it is, futuristic. Everything is here. It's just how you're putting them together. So I can go on forever.
Yeah, so that's why when you talk about this one, I'm thinking, okay, my God, that's a very big picture, and then everything we need to consider, and there's some kind of the impact to everybody. You mentioned about individual.
Oh, sorry.
Whatever.
Let me recap this part with those 3 questions for our audience. So for the audience who operating a business or has responsibility, first question you ask, well, what kind of regulations is it going to be coming down to me or my type of company, right? So that's the first question. What kind of regulations? And if not, if you want to do a better job, then what kind of framework that you want to follow? So there's 2 biggest one, NIST and ISO 27001. And those are not regulations. Those are just framework for you to follow. And of course, in Hong Kong, there are OGCIO or PCPD's PIA, right? So those are frameworks. That's the first question. For the second question is, well, do I have enough human resource, talents within my organizations? And I bet you 80% of them say no, because there's a 3 million shortage worldwide of cybersecurity professionals. So if anybody come and tell you, yeah, we have all the talents we need, really, I would challenge them. So that's the second question. What kind of resource dealing with IT, cybersecurity, and governance? And we kind of lump it as an internal auditor. Do you have that kind of role as an internal auditor to make sure everything you do in technical and governance comply to the first questions about the regulations or the framework? Then, of course, the third question is, what are we doing? What do we have today in our environment that needs to meet the first challenge, the obligations, the regulations? So that means that goes into the questions of gap analysis. And I'm not going to go there. I'm going to stop. So those are the 3 questions. We always engage with our client with those 3 questions. And any 2 out of 3 or any 1 out of 3 that they need to start looking at where do we start, or how do we start?
Yes, thank you so much. Okay, but I'm not talking about personally. Okay, if I were the owner or the management team of some of the organization, I truly understand that there is something we need to consider. Let's say, for example, you just mentioned the risk governance, something like that, and then we need to make sure that increase the awareness of this very important topic to everybody in the organization. But if I really want to do something, okay, yeah, you mentioned about how to start, or there is some of the challenge, okay. How can we very effectively to try to work with different experts? Because you mentioned so many experts over there. Some of them may be a technical expert, they have some kind of the product platform to help me to address some of the issue. Some of the experts may be talking about the governance, they have a much better understanding about the policy or maybe even the regulation, which one is compulsory, which one is maybe just an optional, a framework or something like that. How can an organization have some kind of idea how to start this one? I just want to, maybe they only go to have some kind of consulting firm, they declare that they are experts. So that's why I just believe this organization is good enough, or it's not the case. You need to shopping around in the market to see A, B, C, D, F, G. There's so many different parties, and I need to set up at least a small team of person in the organization to try to interact with different experts to try to build some kind of the governance policy for the particular organization. How can we work with so many different kind of the parties? Any idea for us. I even don't talk about small company or big company, just a company.
Right. That's
Yeah.
fine. Yeah. So we always engage that we assume. Okay. So we have to make some assumptions. And the first assumption is you don't have money. You don't have budget. You don't have resources.
Yes.
Right. Of course, if you're a big company, you have plenty of team powers, manpowers. That's a different story. But let's just start with, I'm a small business owner that I worry about I'm going to get hacked because of ransomware, phishing attack. Where do I start? That's why you can go to the government and start looking into the governments. And, in Hong Kong that I'm familiar with, and of course in US, that's a lot more resource, but in Hong Kong, OGCIO, PCPD, that they have been giving a lot of recommendations and what the small business can do, right? So always look into the government website. In fact, that most of I would believe all of the government in the world has some type of assessments that for you to do. If not, just Google it. That's what part of the gap analysis or assessment that you can do. Just answer some of the questions. And there's so many free, actually, thank you for touching on that point too. We have given out 25 questions, but nobody cares. Nobody answered them. and that's part of the challenge that we, as a practitioner coming into looking into, well, you know what, you got to sit down with me at least to try to answer those questions, right? But I think this, because of the COVID, the mentality is changing because everybody is more relying on the digital and the cyber world. So now go back into your question. So starting with the governments, there is plenty of resource to look into it. Now, if the government, you can look at the questions and say, well, I don't know what it's talking about, right? Because I'm doing the business. I'm just a restaurant owner. I have no IT background. I'm sure that you got friends, business networks that related to people like me, that all day long just going to study about all this kind of thing, right? But of course that it is very hard to approach those questions when you have no knowledge of what cybersecurity is. I don't know what I don't know, so how can I start those questions, right? Let's go back into those 3 questions that I said earlier. Those are the 3 questions that we spend many years, talk to many people, and go back into, well, do you have any regulations or do you have any concerns? And if it's a restaurant owner, small restaurant owners, they say, no, I'm using cash basis. Why would I have any digital? Well, okay, then that's fine. End of the conversation. You don't have to worry about it. Just make sure you stash your money, somewhere safe. Don't put it under your pillow. Try to put it in a bank. As a friend, you would tell them this type of recommendations, right? I hope. But some people don't trust the bank. So then of course, that's the end of that conversation, because you cannot drag a person if they don't want to face this type of challenge, they don't want to deal with this type of problems. You cannot turn them around. No matter what you say, no matter what you do, you're not going to be right. And why is that going into that kind of conversation? It's all about trust. Everything is about trust, because cyber world, you can't touch it. Digital assets, you can't see it. You can't touch it. So it's a lot to do with trust. And that brings it into the second type of approach. Let's just say your company has a decent size, right? That you need IT, you have a network. Your vendor is the best person to ask. Okay, I can tell you some of the horror story about those vendors, but that's a good approach. Ask your IT vendor. And that's why that what we're doing right now is to try to bring up the IT people's level into cybersecurity. And by visualizing these type of questions in a dashboard environment or in console environment. So what we refer as data visualizations, right? In the technology world. How can you make those business intelligence, convert it into a graph chart, red light, yellow light, green light. So it can easy to start the communication between the IT vendor and the business leaders. Hey, you know what? Unfortunately, you're always hitting the green light. Do you want to do something about it? Well, again, this is the trust comes in. Do you have that trust on the vendor? Are they doing the right thing? But let's just say that, they're the only resource you have. But it's better than nothing. You're going to start with that. Then you go on to the next level. You talk to the cybersecurity professionals. The cybersecurity professionals would have a different set of tools, like what we refer as security and risk assessment tool. And I'm sure a lot of audience why they are here today is because that's what I'm giving out, right? And I'll talk to you more about that. So the security and risk assessment, we call it SARA, right? SARA, security and risk assessment, easy to remember. So what SARA does is we would take on a technical analysis with fully automated tool sets. Why fully automated tool sets comparing to just a few years ago is still semi-automatic tool sets? Is because of the cost and because of the efficiency. Now, I started when there is no software solutions doing vulnerability scanning. That's when I started into cybersecurity. And I can remember that was about 17 years ago. We have to manually put together all the open source tools. And for any technical audience, if they want to know how, come and talk to me. I'm not going to bore you guys on this sections. So we put together the tool sets and do the vulnerability scanning 17 years ago. And what today's world in the parallel is penetration testing. And 17 years ago, when we're doing vulnerability scannings, we identify the vulnerability and then let the company knows what kind of problem they have and how to fix it, the remediation recommendations. And then the next step is how to enhance it. Now, that's where the cybersecurity professional is different from the IT, because we emphasize on identifying and what we call the detection of security incidents and resolve the security incidents. That's cybersecurity in a nutshell. So not just say, oh, you got a problem. Well, now you go fix it on your own. So that's just half of the solution. Now, next phase, what we're talking about, the fifth generation, is what we just talked about in the cyber risk governance. We have to map those technical security risk into the GRC risk. So not just that you have a technical issue we're going to resolve, but how does that impacting to your regulatory issues? And I'll give you an example drawing the parallel about penetration tests in a second. And that governance control, why do we care about that governance control? Well, because that even though you might not get hacked, but you might get penalized by those 4 layers of regulations. Might not be here today yet, or it depends on what country you are in, that is already happening in a lot of different places, including look at the first layer, which is the GDPR. And in Hong Kong, specifically case Cathay Pacific back in 2018. It's not that they did not do vulnerability scanning, but they didn't do it. They only did it like, few times. Why is that? I don't know. That's the management decisions. But that is why the cyber risk governance practitioner needs to let the board and the C-suite know, yes, that you are doing this already, but it might not be enough to comply to certain regulatory issues, such as GDPR or PCI DSS. Have you satisfied that? And if they don't, well, you might be okay with data breach. You might not get a data breach or cyber attack, but you might get penalized by certain regulations. So that is already happening in the world, but it's going to happen more often. And go back into my local regulations in California, Consumer Privacy Act. I believe next year, the new one, the version 2, is going to be penalizing company with 3 times amount of what they're penalizing them today. And there's going to be more to come in the years, according to Gartner with that prediction. And SEC, Security Exchange Commissions, has already doubling their cybersecurity enforcement team to focus on more regulations about the financial world. So that's going to be impacting to the banks, investment security companies Doesn't matter where they are at. As long as that it touches on SEC, then they have a potential get fined. Now, going back into drawing the parallel into vulnerability scanning to penetration testing. So penetration testing has been around for like 14, 13 years. I don't remember how long we started it when we start conducting penetration tests. But again, a lot to do with semi-automatic, using a lot of open source tool. Kali Linux is very famous for penetration tests. But the problem we found is the penetration tester themselves. Because one, this is not a field that is being standardized yet. And it's just according to certain framework, such as OWASP Top 10 or PCI DSS framework of penetration testing. And there are a few other organizations that define this framework. But again, they're very loosely being defined because the technicality, it could get very complex, and every company has somewhat of a different environment. So there is very hard to standardize it. So the penetration testers back in the years that they don't even have certifications. I'm not talking about very far away. I'm talking about maybe 5, 10 years ago, or less, certainly for less than 10 years ago. There is no penetration certificates. There is a certified ethical hacker certificate like that, but it doesn't test your knowledge about how you're managing those type of semi-automation tools. And so what that triggers into, what we're saying is the inconsistency of the penetration testing. Because every pen testers that based on their knowledge, based on how they're patient, and then their knowledge testing that exploiting the particular network environment, humans always make errors. We all make errors. So it becomes inconsistent into the result. And then they are very costly. And having a good penetration tester is in the upward of $120,000 US dollars per year. And there are not enough of penetration testers in the world because the volume of attack coming into changing the network environment, changing your IT infrastructure, you just cannot do it fast enough. So usually it's just twice a year being done. And that's why now we are doing it with a company that they develop a fully automated penetration testing to replace the vulnerability scanning. I'm not saying replacing the penetration tester, but we're gonna elevate them to look at the results coming from the penetration, the software after being fully automated and get the result done. Then the pen tester can focus on the result and providing the remediation recommendations.
Yeah,
and the next step in matching onto the governance side. Thank you.
So actually, we still have a few questions, but I do believe the question would be very helpful for some of the people. Okay, maybe they're related to the developer or maybe related to the startup. So the first question is that, as you know, that most of the startup, they focus or dedicate their whole effort to try to build something very innovative to fit for the market. They really have a very limited, as you mentioned, that they have no budget, whatever things, okay, but they build the application. And then lots of people may use this application because it's a new stuff. So that's why everybody download the apps and then use it. Do you have any recommendation for them? Even though, okay, I understand that you don't have the resources to manage all those things, but actually you need to do something to make sure that it's more safety for the user to use it and then not create another problem for everybody. Any tips for them, for the startup company? Sure. Yeah.
Because we are a startup too. We are a cyberport startup. So yeah, we fit into that bill perfectly. And what I've been recommending, if they have the technical capabilities and they don't have the resource, which is budget, then they should look into Bird Suite. Bird Suite is one of the tools to look at the software development into the penetration testing into the software development. So I highly recommend people using Bird Suite if they can. And there are, of course, I'm not saying it's easy, right? Because it is a very complex tool and it takes some learning to do. But that is where I would recommend to start.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned about Cyberport. Actually, is there any kind of the support from Cyberport to help this kind of the startup? Let's say, for example, give them some kind of advice or whatever things.
Well, I am a Cyberport mentor, so
Okay.
I have been giving advice to startups in not just looking at the technical. To be honest with you, I'm too old for too much of the technicality of it, so I'm more focusing on the strategic of it. But of course, that I have done enough years, I can recommend what is the right strategy to approach based on those three questions again: what kind of regulations, what kind of resource talents and money, and then how do you measure and monitor it, right? So I can provide these type of resource, and that's why part of it why I want to go back into the gap analysis and an assessment and try to make it available for the nonprofit and including some of the schools for a limited time, is because I do want to help as my social responsibility, and doing this for free, because I do want to elevate the cognizance, the knowledge and awareness in terms of the whole cyber risk governance. And this is something that I'm not just doing it in here or just doing it recently. I've been doing this for many years, and I have been a mentor for cybersecurity professional groups for many years, and now I'm also mentoring for universities and cities, and to help and to train as an educational program to teach the young ones, if they are interested in IT or anything to do with technology, or even now, of course, metaverse, but you still got to look at cybersecurity, because even though blockchain might be safe, but there's still a lot of hacking going on. We see that in the world, that blockchain itself might be the safest things next to quantum computing, but it's still how you utilizing it in the process, in the progress of it. There's a lot of threats that it needs to be identified. And so when we're doing this deployment of the assessment, then at least that we pointed out, okay, that your environment, especially in the NGOs, that they don't have that much of a resource or a dedicated IT or security, at least that we give them a report. Go talk to your vendors, identify this problem with your vendors. Now, if the vendor can help you to solve those problems, wonderful. If not, then you need to start looking at elsewhere, including the website, Google's. There's plenty of resources. I taught a lot of, going by learning from Google. Now there's Google that also offering courses, Conseillers offering free courses to people to want to learn more about cybersecurity. And that's why it can be done with very, very minimal resource, except your effort. But then, of course, the return, it's in parallel, right? How much effort you want to sink in, then it will increase your cyber resilience by that much.
Yeah, thank you, Stanley. Actually, before I ask the next question, you already covered all those things, because this is something I want to ask you. Okay, is it only available for the free assessment for the NGO? But of course, you already mentioned that some of the education institution, maybe you will consider to give them this kind of the assessment. And the next question is actually talking about, is it necessary to spend some time to work with your consultant together? But you just mentioned about it's an automated process. So I assume that if anybody else they are interested to have some kind of the understanding about their current situation, they can contact you to get the software or a boxes.
Or contact your organization, because we need partners.
Okay.
Because we need partners.
Yes.
And that's the whole thing, that we're not just elevating on the IT professional or cybersecurity professionals, but we also elevating all the partners within the ecosystem. It's like we have many consultants. They are focused on different segments, or in your organization that might be focusing on Microsoft, but Microsoft, because they have all kinds of tools, but a lot of company might not be able to afford that.
Okay.
Before they go so big. So there is a lot of interim steps that they could take until they can work with Microsoft. I know Microsoft, we work with Microsoft a lot as well too, but there are just certain things that it might be more beneficial for the organization based on those 3 questions to identify where they can find other resources. So this is a platform not just for increasing revenue or anything like that. It's actually elevating the cognizance for
Yes.
everybody in the world, and we need to do this as a team together, especially as a technologist, that we are all in the technical world. We have to do this together. Otherwise, the trust from the business leaders and the governors, it's going to be lost, and we need to protect that trust.
Yeah. Okay. I believe that you did a very, very good, not a good job, because you did a good offer to let the organization have a chances to be aware of the so-called cyber risk governance. And of course, starting from this point, there's a lot of the chances for the organization or other practitioner, no matter they're from the technical side or the policies or the consultation side, they can work together to form a community to help each other, to make sure that you mentioned about the trust and all those things, it can be realized in a shorter period of time. Because sometimes when we talk about security, everybody still have the feeling that, okay, I understand security, okay, no need to talk to me, okay, and then until something goes wrong, okay, how can we fix it? Or no way to fix it, okay. Anyway, so I believe that you start a very good, you make a very good starting point. And of course, we are going to work with different kind of NGO to try to see what is the feedback. As you know, that sometimes when we want to try to do something good, but it still need to have the feedback or the support from the
Absolutely.
From the target group. Sometimes the target group say, no, don't touch me. Okay, I really don't want to know anything. Okay, so that's another story. So I believe that that's the close to the end of today's webinar or the sharing section. And of course, Stanley, you gave us a lot of insight. So up to this moment, I really have a much better understanding about the impact of the cyber risk governance and what's the consequence of not knowing about it or not follow some of the policy, because in the coming day, maybe even the developer, they need to take some kind of the penalty if they don't do the job right, something like that. Okay, so I believe that, okay, maybe Alex or CK, do you have any final words want to share? Alex.
Okay, so it's very comprehensive webinar today, and as a developer, I have heard you have mentioned one of the tools that we may have to take look at it, because I think the topic of today mostly around the managerial level, the organization level. But I think it would be great if we have another set webinar talking about, as a developer, how we what will be the impact of the cyber risk and governance. I think we always have, or as a developer, we should have cybersecurity in mind, but how we could deal with the clients, or what are the roles that we should be taking part in. I think that will be a very
highly recommend you should read the book, The Phoenix Project.
The Phoenix Project.
Highly recommend it.
Sure.
DevSecOps. Yes. So
Sure.
yes. So it's a very fun book, easy to read for any level, whether you're IT or business leaders. The Phoenix Projects.
The Phoenix Project.
That's been
Sure.
highly recommended for many, professionals in DevSecOps. Those are the terms. Yeah. And be glad to have another time to share more of my knowledge, the little knowledge that I have.
Make sure we read the book before invite Stanley to have another sharing section.
I give it away to all my interns, my staff when they join. I say, just take it and read that book. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe CK, do you have anything that you want to share or ask Stanley? Take this chances, the last chance for you.
Okay. So again, I think not much question from me, because if we continue, I think we will have to continue till evening. Because again, I think after today's sharing, right, I know that this whole cyber risk governance things is really a very huge topics. Okay, so again, personally, I really appreciate that Stanley share all his knowledge with us, and it's really a very interesting topic. And I hope, besides today, maybe in the very near future, we can have another 2 or 3 webinars with Stanley, because there is just too many things that we don't know. Then we hope to learn
let's
from
let's listen to the feedback. Maybe people already might be throwing eggs onto the screen that because I talked too long already.
You gave lots of the very great information and clarified lots of my question already.
But then a lot of your audience might be already throwing eggs onto the monitors because they
No. I do believe that they will talk to their boss, okay, to make sure that they need to have some idea, understanding about cyber risk governance, to make sure that the organization can still move forward, sustain their business, and then keep their job.
That's what we are trying to elevate. Yes.
Yeah. So CK, thank you so much, CK and Alex. And I do believe that CK maybe you are a little bit jealous about the NGO in Hong Kong because Stanley only offered the free assessment to.
That's not true. Actually,
it's not true. Okay, my God.
No,
okay.
no. We're working with partner worldwide. So we're working with partner worldwide. So it's something that, as I said, that we can actually do a lot of remote control. As long as that you prepare the hardware or the VM, then we can basically conduct it from anywhere in the world.
Oh, thank you so much. So that's why, as you know, that IAMCP is a global organization. We are the biggest Microsoft partner organization. So I will share this good news with the counterpart to make sure that more and more organizations, no matter they are small or big, they have the chances to know about the cyber risk governance. And then in the coming days, less hacking, more business they can do. And then in the coming days, a lot of people, they can enjoy the benefits. Yeah. Okay, so if that's the case, okay, thank you so much for everybody. Thank you so much, Stanley, again, because you gave us not a lecture, very good sharing section, very practical. So that's why everybody, I believe that they enjoy it so much. Okay, so next time we invite you again to share another topic with us. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.